Hello everyone. Today we will start with the new chapter, that is chapter 8, Women, Caste and Reform. About 200 years ago, Indian society looked very different from today. Many customs and traditions controlled people's lives, especially those of women and lower caste. Most girls did not go to school. Education was mainly for boys from upper caste families. Women were often married at a very young age, sometimes even before they became adults. Widows were not allowed to remarry and had to live under strict rules. Similarly, caste divisions were very rigid. People from lower caste were often denied entry into temples, schools, and even public wells. Occupations were determined by birth, and social mobility was almost impossible. But as the 19th century began, new ideas from reformers, missionaries, and educated Indians started to challenge these old beliefs. They asked, why should women be denied education? Why should some castes be treated as inferior? Thus began India's great age of social reform, which reshaped the country's path toward equality and modernity. The early 19th century marks a crucial social transition in India, coinciding with the consolidation of British colonial power. While colonial rule disrupted traditional structures, it also introduced Western education, print culture, and administrative reforms, which became platform for social criticism. Understanding this social background is essential for analyzing the rise of reform movements, for example, Brahmo Samaj, Arya Samaj, Prarthana Samaj, Satya Sodhak Samaj. The emergence of social consciousness regarding women's rights, caste equality, and education. The link between social reform and political awakening, as educated Indians later led the nationalist movement. In short, the reform era laid the foundation of India's modern social structure, influencing constitutional values of equality, liberty, and justice. The first wave of reform, therefore, began with questions about women's status and rights, because the condition of women reflected the moral and cultural state of society itself. In traditional Indian society, women were expected to follow strict social rules. Most girls were married very young, and widows were not allowed to remarry. They had no access to education, and people believed that women studying or writing would bring bad luck. Because of these restrictions, women had little control over their lives, no choice in marriage, work, or learning. But during the 19th century, a few courageous men and women began to speak out against these injustices. They believed that education was the key to women's empowerment and that educated women could reform society from within. As you can see in the picture, Sati is being performed in this picture. This picture is painted by Balthazar Solvin. Now, Sati was a ritual where a widow was forced or expected to burn herself on her husband's funeral pyre. Many people believed this act proved a woman's purity and devotion. Reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy speak against this inhuman custom. He used ancient Hindu texts to prove that Sati was not supported by true religion. His campaign and discussion with British officials led to the abolition of Sati in 1829 by Lord William Bentinck. Next is the widow remarriage movement. In traditional society, widows were forced to live in isolation and were not allowed to remarry. Reformers like Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar believed this was cruel against both reason and scripture. He wrote books and collected petitions from across Bengal, showing that Hindu law supported widow remarriage. This movement resulted in the Hindu Widows Remarriage Act of 1856, which legally allowed widows to remarry. Now, these reforms gave new hope to Indian women and marked the new beginning of social change through law and education. Let's learn about the key reformers who fought for women's rights and education. First is Raja Ram Mohan Roy. He argued that sati and child marriage were against humanity and true religion. He used ancient scriptures to prove that sati had no sanction in Hindu text. He founded the Brahmo Samaj in 1828 and helped secure the abolition of sati in 1829. Now next is Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar. He used Hindi scripture and rational arguments to promote widow remarriage and female education. He founded a school for girls in Bengal. His effort led to the Widow Remarriage Act of 1856, though society resisted it at first. Next is Jyoti Rao and Savitribai Phule. They opened India's first school for girls in Pune in 1848. They taught children from lower caste and poor families, breaking caste and gender barriers together. They believed that education must free both women and oppressed caste from social slavery. Next is Pandita Ramabai. She was a Sanskrit scholar and reformer who campaigned for widows' education. She founded the Mukti Mission in 1889. Now, missionaries also opened girls' school in different parts of India. They taught subjects like reading, writing, arithmetic, along with moral education based on Christian values. While not everyone agreed with their approach, these schools helped more girls get an education for the first time. Missionary institutions such as Serampore Mission in 1800 and Bethany School in 1849 played a crucial part in normalizing female education. The Woods Dispatch of 1854 formally endorsed girls' education, creating space for collaboration between Indian reformers and colonial administrators. These developments reflected a larger shift toward state supported education, which became central to later reforms. The movement for women's education and social reform marked the beginning of modern social change in India. It not only challenged religious orthodoxy but also laid the foundation for gender equality legislation in later decades. Reform movements in 19th century India were transformative, especially regarding the rights and status of women. These reforms produced profound legal, educational, social, and political change that will shape India's society today. Now let's see what law or act was passed to bring the social reform in 19th century. Now the abolition of sati in 1829 outlawed the practice of burning widows on their husband's funeral pyre, marking a significant state intervention into deeply rooted social custom. And Widow Remarriage Act of 1856 enabled widows to legally remarry, challenging the norm of perpetual widowhood and granting women new personal autonomy. Now, Age of Consent Act of 1891 raised the age of consent for marriage, offering young girls state protection against early marriage. Now, regulation of female infanticide. Through a series of British regulation and pressure from Indian reformers in various presidencies during the early and mid 19th century, female infanticide was criminalized, raising awareness about the value of girl child and reinforcing the government's commitment to protect vulnerable section of society. Collectively, these steps laid the groundwork for gradual recognition of women's legal and social rights in Indian society. Now, education became the primary vehicle for empowerment, not simply a literacy tool, but a means to develop critical thinking and awareness. Visionaries like Jyoti Rao Phule, with Savitribai Phule, Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar, and various Christian missionaries established schools for girls, breaking social taboos around female education and demonstrating that women could excel academically and socially. These advances helped cultivate a generation of educated women who would later assume leadership roles in reform and nationalist movements. The reform era witnessed the rise of women reformers such as Savitribai Phule, who was the first female teacher in India. Pandita Ramabai, she was an educationist and social reformer. And Tarabai Sinde. She was a pioneer feminist writer. Their activism not only challenged specific practices like sati or child marriage, but also promoted a broader awareness of women's dignity and their rights as individuals and citizens. These efforts began to shift public consciousness about women's role, laying the groundwork for Indian feminism that was both indigenous and reformist. The reform movements provided ideological and organization blueprint for later women's movement. They proved that activism could deliver practical change and inspired later generation of women to demand equality and justice. The criminalization of female infanticide, sati, and widow restrictions remained a legal and moral touchstone in contemporary gender justice debate. These reforms became some of the earliest examples of social legislation in India, combining moral persuasion, print debate, and law. Now, print culture dramatically changed the landscape of social reform in 19th century India, making ideas more infectious and debate more vibrant. The arrival of newspaper, slim pamphlet, and periodicals put the power of information into the hands of thousands, transforming reforms from whispered discussion to issue debated in tea stalls, temples, and town meetings. Suddenly, ordinary men and women could encounter stories of reform, learn about women's rights, and consider new possibilities for society. Now, reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Rai, who launched the influential newspaper Sambad Kaumudi in 1821, and Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar took full advantage of the printing press. They filled pamphlets with arguments that wove together rational thought and religious wisdom, reinterpreting, reinterpreting scripture to show that reform was not alien but in sync with Indian tradition. Newspaper did not merely report reforms like the abolition of sati or the Widow Remarriage Act. They explained, advocated, and invited reader to reflect and engage. Now, print culture did more than spread reform. It birthed India's first true public sphere. For the first time, supporters and critics alike had a platform to express their views in public. Key debates unfolded on the pages of magazine and newspaper, from reformer presenting persuasive argument for change to conservative Brahmins fiercely defending tradition through journals, article, and pamphlet of their own. The battle over reform became as much intellectual and cultural as it was legal. As the British government positioned itself as a champion of moral reform through laws like abolition of sati, print culture allowed both support and suspicion to spread. Reformers collaborated with colonial administrators to focus on the civilizing mission. But many Indians regarded these laws as cultural intrusion. Orthodox Sabhas skillfully used print to rally public opinion, arguing that such interference endangered religious freedom. Yet the commitment of reformers who combined public campaign with petitions and relentless publishing gradually built public moral pressure. The effect of these swirling debates went far beyond single issue. Print culture created the blueprint for future movements, fusing, fusing legislative change with public awareness and dialogue. A model Gandhi, Ambedkar, and countless activists would later adopt. While pioneers like Roy and Vidyasagar illuminated women's issue, the torch quickly passed to others ready to challenge the caste system and all forms of injustice fueled by the unifying force of print. Print turned social reform into a living, shared conversation, one still evolving today in newspaper, online journals, and community debates across India. While early Indian social reform movements are often associated with Hindu leaders like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar, the spirit of reform quickly spread beyond regional and religious boundaries. Throughout the 19th century, Muslim reformers and women leaders played a vital role in reimagining women's role, advocating for change in education, women's marriage custom, and social participation. In many traditional Muslim families of the time, there was deep resistance to girls' education, rooted in concern that learning might turn daughters away from household duties or religious observance. Yet the winds of change brought new voices, leaders who argued that education was not only compatible with Islamic values but essential for strengthening families and society itself. Education, they believed, would produce literate mothers who would raise educated, morally upright children and contribute to the progress of the nation. Now, prominent figures like Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan, founder of the Aligarh movement, advocated women's education as a tool for societal upliftment. Educationist and activist Begum Ruqayya Sakhawat Hussain championed girls' schooling in Bengal, establishing the Sakhawat Memorial Girls' School in 1911 and urging women to claim their rights to knowledge. These pioneers responded directly to community and anxieties, showing how education could honor faith while broadening opportunities. Now, Mumtaz Ali was a reformer who believed that Islam supported women's education and equality. He started writing articles and books to spread this message among ordinary people. Now, he was a prominent scholar and reformer who combined Islamic learning with modern ideas. In his famous book, Hukukun Niswan, meaning Rights of Women, he argued that Quran upheld women's right to education, property, and dignity. Now, along with his wife, Muhammadi Begum, he edited Urdu journals like Tehzeebun Niswa and Khatun, which discuss female education, health, and morality. These journals became platform for early Muslim feminist voices and inspired other writers, including early female novelists like Rashid Jahan and Ismat Chugtai in the next generation. Now, the Begums of Bhopal. It was a princely state ruled by women. The Begums of Bhopal worked hard to improve the lives of their people, especially girls. They built school for girls and promoted women's participation in society while also respecting Islamic values. The Begums of Bhopal, especially Sultan Jahan Begum, who ruled from 1901 to 1926, represent a unique model of female Muslim leadership in colonial India. She founded several schools and colleges for girls and introduced free and compulsory primary education, a first among Indian princely states. She supported public health initiatives, vocational training, and teacher education for women. As Chancellor of AMU, she funded educational reform for women within the broader Aligarh movement. Her approach reflected modernity with cultural sensitivity, showing that reform and religion could coexist. Now, the Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, who started the Aligarh movement, also inspired discussion about modern education for Muslims. Though his focus was mainly on boys, his followers later expanded the idea to include education for girls as well. The Aligarh movement, founded in 1875 by Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, emphasized scientific and rational education among Muslims. It indirectly encouraged female education through affiliated initiative. The Aligarh Janana Madrasa and Jamaatul Niswa promoted literacy and modern subjects like Muslim girls. Modern subject among Muslim girls. Later reformers like Sheikh Abdullah Wahid Jahan Begum established Women's College, Aligarh, which evolved into Aligarh Muslim University's Women's College. This linked Muslim women's education with the larger national reform discourse and symbolized the emergence of modern Muslim womanhood. These movements demonstrate that the social reform in colonial India was diverse and community driven. They reveal how education became a shared platform for empowerment, even though the methods and justification differed, some rooted in religion, others in modern rationalism. Now, we saw how reformers across communities like Hindu and Muslim used the education as a tool of empowerment for women. But social inequality in India was not just about gender. It was also deeply rooted in the caste system, which divided society into rigid hierarchies. Just as reformers worked to free women from oppressive customs, others now rose to challenge discrimination based on birth and occupation, seeking to create a society built on equality and dignity for all. In 19th century India, the caste system decided everything. What work people could do, what they could eat, where they could live, and even who they could marry. People from the so-called lower caste or Shudras and Atishudras, meaning Dalit, were treated unfairly. They were denied education, temple entry, and social respect. Many reformers felt that these divisions were unjust and unholy. They said that all people are equal before God and that caste based discrimination must end. This led to new movements that questioned old hierarchies and called for social equality and education for all. Early reformers such as Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Jyotirao Phule played a pioneering role in critiquing and challenging the caste system. Their ideas and actions planted the seeds for later social transformation and offered new framework for justice, equality, and progress. Now, Raja Ram Mohan Rai, renowned for his campaign against sati and child marriage, also boldly speak out against caste-based inequality. Through the Brahmo Samaj, which was founded in 1828, Roy promoted universal humanism, encouraging Indians to see religion as a source of unity and ethical behavior rather than division. He rejected rituals that reinforced caste distinction and pursued a rational, ethical approach to religion, a blend of spiritual modernism and moral reasoning. Roy believed that blind adherence to tradition was contrary to the true spirit of religion, which for him taught the equality of all human beings. Now, Rao Phule, he was a champion of the oppressed. He was a forceful voice against caste injustice, especially in Maharashtra, and he saw education as the most powerful weapon for social change. Phule, together with Savitribai Phule, opened the first girls' school in India, later started a school for Sudras and Atishudras, making learning accessible to those excluded by the caste system. He was among the first thinkers to connect caste oppressions to broader social and economic inequality, asserting that discrimination was not God's will but the result of human exploitation. By founding the Satya Samaj in 1873, Phule galvanized collective action, challenging Brahmanical authority and celebrating the dignity and unity of all caste. Now, this critique of caste by Roy and Phule were revolutionary for their time. They highlighted that true reform required going beyond surface ritual. It meant reimagining social relationship on the basis of equality, rationality, and justice. Their legacy continued to inspire all who fight against inherited injustice in India. These stories show that progressive change was not just about abolishing bad custom, but about building new, inclusive vision for a better society. Something that exam experience can draw upon as model of transformative leadership. Now, as time went on, the demand for equality took a new form, not just access to school or social mobility, but access to places of worship and public spaces. For centuries, Dalit and lower caste were denied entry into temples, a visible symbol of caste based exclusion. In olden times, many temples in India did not allow people from lower caste to enter. They were considered untouchable and often had to pray outside the temple gates. This was very unfair because everyone should have the right to worship God equally. The most famous leader who fought for this cause was none other than Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He led several temple entry movements where Dalits together demanded the right to pray inside temples just like everybody else. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar politicized the temple entry issue, turning it into a mass movement for Dalit rights and social justice. His campaign included the Mahad Satyagraha in 1927, which asserted Dalit rights to draw water from public tanks, symbolizing the fight for equality in public spaces. The Kalaram Temple movement in 1930, where Ambedkar led Dalit in entering a temple traditionally barred to them, facing fierce opposition yet insisting that religion cannot justify inequality. Ambedkar argued that if Hinduism could not accommodate equality, Dalits must seek justice beyond religious confines, thus politicizing Dalit identity and framing demands for citizenship, law, and dignity. A landmark legal victory was the temple entry proclamation Bhira Tirunal Balaram Verma in Travancore, which legally ended caste-based temple exclusion. Influenced by the earlier movement like Vayakam Satyagraha and growing public pressure, this proclamation became a beacon for similar reforms in other presidencies and a symbolic win for social justice. Despite these reforms, caste discrimination persisted in daily life. Post independence, Ambedkar ensured constitutional safeguard against Article 15 and 17 and 46, abolishing untouchability and promoting equality. The temple entry movement reflected how social reform matured into a broader human rights struggle, shaping India's constitutional vision centered on justice and dignity. We saw how movements like Temple Entry Satyagraha and the effort of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar turned social reform into a constitutional principle of equality. However, even after independence and adoption of Indian Constitution, the journey towards complete social equality has remained unfinished. The ideas of reformers, education, dignity, and justice for all continue to shape India's laws, activism, and public debates even today. India has changed a lot since the time of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Phule, and Ambedkar. Today, untouchability is banned by law and everyone has the right to equality and education. But in some places, caste discrimination and gender inequality still exist. Urbanization, new schools, and the laws have given many people new opportunities. But social attitudes often take longer to change. That is why reformer ideas remain important. They remind us that real progress means treating everyone equally, not just in law but also in daily life. Despite great progress, significant work remains to bridge the gap between legal equality and social reality. India faces new challenges in discrimination, including digital, economic, and environmental fronts. The focus now is on ensuring inclusive growth and protecting the dignity of all citizens as part of ethical governance and democratic evolution. Social reform is thus a continuous process, never finished but always moving forward. The 19th and early 20th century in India saw a series of social reform movements that challenged deeply ingrained inequalities based on caste, gender, and tradition. Early reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Jyotirao Phule laid the foundation by opposing practices such as sati, child marriage, and caste oppression while advocating women's education and social equality. They emphasize rationality, human dignity, and universal rights, initiating a moral and intellectual awakening. Now, there was another movement, the non Brahmin movement gained prominence in the 19th century. The non Brahmins argued that Brahmins, who were traditionally priests and considered the highest caste, and preserved their social supremacy by controlling education, religious rituals, and government administration. They contended that Brahmins were descendant of Aryan invaders who marginalized the indigenous Dravidian people in the south. The movement aimed at dismantling Brahminical dominance by advocating for equal access to education, jobs, and political representation for all castes, particularly the non-Brahmin caste. In South India, the movement was linked to the self-respect movement led by E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, Periyar, who strongly criticized Brahmin dominance and Hindu scriptures that justifies caste divisions. The Justice Party, formed in Madras in 1960 with support from non-Brahmin group, became a political platform representing these communities. Now let's start with the exercise. First is let's recall. Now the questions are, what social ideas did the following people support? First is Ram Mohan Roy. So the Ram Mohan Roy opposed practices like sati, child marriage, and caste discrimination. He advocated women's rights, especially widow remarriage and girls' education. He supported modern, rational education, including science and English. He promoted monotheism and opposed idol worship. Another one next is Dayanand Saraswati. So he called for a return to the Vedas as the true source of knowledge. He supported equality for men and women, remarriage, and women's education. He opposed caste restriction, idol worship, and child marriage. He founded the Arya Samaj in 1875 with the slogan "Back to the Vedas." Vedas. Next is Veera Salingam Pantulu. He was a leading reformer in Andhra Pradesh. He advocated women's education, widow remarriage, combating child marriage and dowry. He established schools and widow remarriage association. Next is Jyotirao Phule. He fought against caste discrimination and Brahminical dominance. He supported education for women and lower caste and promoted equality. He founded the Satyasodak Samaj, meaning Truth Seekers Society. He opened a school for girls and lower caste with Savitribai Phule. Next is Pandita Ramabai. He championed women's rights and education, especially widows. He criticized patriarchal and caste oppression. He founded Sarda Sadan, a home for widows. He advocated for women's independence and social reform. Next is Periyar. Now, the Periyar led fight against caste hierarchy and Brahminical dominance in Tamil Nadu. He founded the self-respect movement promoting rationalism and equality for men and women. He criticized religious superstitions and social inequality. Next is Mumtaz Ali. Now, he was a social reformer advocating women's education and gender equality within Muslim society. He wrote Hukukun Niswa, meaning rights of women, promoting rational Quran interpretation. Now next is Ishwachand Vidyasagar. He was a humanist reformer from Bengal. He advocated widow remarriage, girls' education, and abolition of child marriage. He simplified Bengali script and promoted modern education. He led the movement resulting in the Widow Remarriage Act of 1856. Next is state whether true or false. The first statement is when the British captured Bengal, they framed many new laws to regulate the rules regarding marriage, adoption, inheritance of property, etc. It is a true statement. The British introduced many new laws in Bengal and later all over India to regulate social customs such as marriages, inheritance, and adoption. Now, the next is social reformer had to discard the ancient text in order to argue for reform in social practices. It is a false statement. Most social reformers did not discard ancient text. Instead, they reinterpreted them to show that social evils like sati or child marriage were not truly supported by the scriptures. Now, the next is reformers got full support from all sections of the people in the country. It is a false statement as they had to face a lot of opposition from orthodox section of society who wanted to preserve old custom. Not everyone supported the reforms. The Child Marriage Resistant Act was passed in 1829. No, it is false. It was passed in 1929, not 1829. 1829 was the year sati was banned. Now the next is how did the knowledge of ancient text help the reformers promote new laws? Now Indian social reformers of the 19th and early 20th century carefully studied ancient text, religious text, the Vedas, Upanishad and Smritis to challenge unfair social practices. They argued that original scripture supported values of equality, justice, and compassion, contrary to rigid and oppressive customs. By interpreting these texts through the lens of reason and ethical principle, reformers showed that true religion upheld dignity for all, which helped them gain the support of both the people and the British government for crucial social changes like the abolition of sati in 1829 and Widows Remarriage Act of 1856. Next is what were the different reasons people had for not sending girls to school? Now, there were many reasons. One could be fear of losing tradition. Many believed educating girls would make them disobedient and lead them away from their traditional family roles as homemakers and caregivers. Another one could be social customs and taboos. Orthodox families thought girls should not go out in public, especially where they might meet boys or strangers, to maintain family honor and purity. Now, there was a widespread notion that educated girls would have difficulty finding suitable husbands, as education was not seen as necessary or desirable for marriage. Now, parents feared that for their daughter's safety when traveling to distant school, making it risky to send them regularly. Now, with mostly male teachers initially, families were uncomfortable sending girls to school run by men, further deterring education. Now, these factors combined with prevailing patriarchal and conservative attitudes significantly delayed the widespread education of girls until reformers and changing social dynamics gradually challenged and overcame these barriers. Now, the next is why were Christian missionaries attacked by many people in the country? Would some people have supported them too? If so, for what reasons? Now, they faced opposition from many Indians because their activity was seen as a threat to native faith and cultural traditions. Many people believed that missionaries sought to convert Indians to Christianity through education and social work. Their criticism of social Indian practices such as idol worship, caste distinction, and child marriage offended conservative section of society, since they often operated under the British protection. Missionaries were also viewed as agents of cultural domination. Moreover, missionary school, which spread Western ideas and Christian values, raised fears that traditional beliefs and local customs would be undermined. Now, in brief, while many Indians attacked the missionaries for allegedly weakening indigenous religion and culture, others supported them for their role in spreading education, promoting reform, and helping the underprivileged. Now, the next is In the British period, what new opportunities opened up for people who came from castes that were regarded as low? Now, new jobs created by British were in railways, factories, plantation, and government offices opened diverse employment options. They worked as laborers, drivers, cooks, clerks, and factory workers, breaking traditional caste roles. Now, missionary and government school admitted lower caste children, educated persons from these communities, which later they became teachers, lawyers, and government officials. They joined army and police, which offered steady income and social mobility. Now, leaders like Jyotirao Phule, Periyar, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar promoted education and equality. Organizations like Satyasodhak Samaj provided a platform to assert rights. Now, cities weakened caste restriction, fostering social mixing and independence. Now, people from lower caste accessed new education, jobs, army roles, and reform platforms during the British era, helping them leave behind traditional caste occupation and assert equality. How did Jyoti Rao, the reformer, justify their criticism of caste inequality in society? Now, Jyotirao Phule argued that the upper caste. Now, Jyotirao Phule argued that the upper caste exploited religion to keep lower caste illiterate and oppressed. He emphasized that true religion teaching promote equality rather than caste discrimination. Now, he studied ancient texts and historical facts to reveal that the caste hierarchy was created by Aryan invaders to dominate the original inhabitant. He demonstrated that caste division were man-made social construct, not divine ordinance. Now, he believed education was crucial for lower caste to realize their rights and challenge injustice, making education a tool for social emancipation. Now, they upheld the idea that every human is equal and rejected notion of impurity or low birth. They advocated moral and social equality as essential for a just and fair society. He founded the Satyasodhak Samaj to promote self-respect, equality, and social reform among marginalized groups. Now the next is, why did Phule dedicate his book Gulamgiri to the American movement to free slave? Now Jyotirao Phule dedicated his book Gulamgiri to the American movement to free slaves because he saw a strong parallel between the oppression faced by lower caste in India and the enslavement of black people in America. Both groups were denied basic rights, treated as inferior, and subjected to severe social injustice. By dedicating his book to those who fought to end slavery in America, Phule expressed solidarity with all people struggling for freedom and equality globally. He intended this dedication to serve as a powerful message to Indian society, emphasizing that just as slavery was morally wrong and abolished in America, the caste system in India was similarly a form of slavery that needed to be dismantled. Phule hoped this comparison would enlighten people in India about the deep injustices of caste discrimination and inspire them to support social reform and equality. In essence, Phule's dedication symbolized the common fight against oppression and a shared vision for human rights and dignity across continents. Now, the next is, what did Ambedkar want to achieve through the temple entry movement? Now, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's temple entry movement aimed to secure equality and dignity for the oppressed community by asserting their right to enter and worship in temples, which had been traditionally denied to them due to caste-based untouchability. He viewed this entry as a powerful symbol of social equality and human respect, challenging the religious justification for caste discrimination and untouchability, which branded Dalits as impure and unworthy. The movement was intended not only to break ritual barriers but also to awaken Dalits to their rights and encourage them to resist social oppression collectively. The Temple Entry movement involved non-violent protest and satyagraha, with notable activities like the Amba Devi Mandir Satyagraha and the Kala Ram Temple Entry movement led by Ambedkar himself. It highlighted systemic caste prejudice and ultimately contributed to larger gains as the Temple Entry Proclamation of 1936 in Travancore, which legally ended restriction for lower caste in many temples. Now the next is, why were Jyotirao Phule and Ramaswamy Naicker critical of the national movement? Did their criticism help national struggle in any way? Now they were critical of the national movement because they believed it was dominated by upper caste leaders who prioritized political power over social equality. They argued that the INC and other national leaders often neglected pressing social issues like caste discrimination, untouchability, and gender inequality. Fully emphasized that political freedom was incomplete without the liberation of lower caste from social oppression. While Periyar's own experience of caste discrimination within the Congress led him to start the self respect movement focused on social equality and rationalism. Their ideas helped shape the vision for an inclusive India, which was later reflected in the Indian Constitution's guarantees of the equality, liberty, and justice for all citizens. In the next video, we will start with the new chapter, that is chapter 9, The Making of the National Movement, 1870 to 1947. Thank you.